So we have another update when it comes to the status of WrestleMania 37 this year, and it gets more and more interesting when it comes to the return of live fans and the length and duration of the show, because a new report has come out from the Wrestling Observer newsletter, and we spoke about this earlier on in the week. We spoke about, there was the report from WrestleVotes that said there was looking towards to be about 25,000 live fans in attendance per night at Raymond James Stadium across both nights, and to me at the time, my initial reaction to that is way too many people during this current pandemic. That is a pandemic's haven, frankly, and it looks to me like it could have all the earmarks and potential for a super spreader event, but frankly it's even worse than that, because reportedly WWE is planning 30,000 fans on each night of WrestleMania 37. As I mentioned, it was reported earlier in the week via WrestleVotes on Twitter that WWE officials were planning to have upwards of 25,000 fans at Raymond James Stadium for night 1 and night 2 of WrestleMania 37. But in an update, the Wrestling Observer newsletter is now reporting that the plan is to put 30,000 fans in the stadium on both nights. Now, that to me is insanity. Absolutely insanity, but we'll continue with the report and I'll give you my thoughts on it. The NFL Super Bowl 55 is scheduled, of course, for Raymond James Stadium on February 7, and it was noted that if the NFL puts more fans in the venue, then WWE will likely go for even more than 30,000. However, 30,000 for each night was the goal as of earlier this week. Now, regarding the WrestleMania 37 broadcast as well, it's believed that each night will run for 4.5 hours, 4.5 hours, with the first match taking place at 5:30 Eastern Time, with a targeted ending of 10 p.m. Eastern Time as well. Now, there is so much to break down there. First of all, 25,000 fans, when that was announced earlier this week, to me, that was a lot. And frankly, that was way too much anyway. I mentioned it earlier this week. I don't care if you can say, social distancing seating, which will be the case. I don't care if you say wearing masks, which will be the case. I don't care if you say hand sanitizing stations and you try and keep it as safe as possible. A large public gathering of 30,000 people is insanity during any period of a pandemic. We don't know what's going to be like in 3 or 4 more months' time. I understand that, and I know people will say, well, vaccinations and this and that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, and you can already see the mistakes. I think this is the most infuriating thing about this, is you can already see the mistakes and you can already see the criticisms of it when it comes to June, July, August or September. They're going to look back on it in hindsight and go, what a terrible idea. Look at it now. WWE will have all of this negative PR about how WrestleMania 37, which was meant to be WWE's grand reopening of having live fans back in attendance, was this huge super spreader event and so many people got sick because of it. It just seems madness. And now, I would usually question if 30,000 people each night, so a combined 60,000 people potentially, I mean, there are probably likely going to be a lot of people that go to both nights, but potentially 60,000 people, you would question if realistically 60,000 people would buy a ticket. But frankly, this is in the state of Florida. There's a reason WWE wanted to have the event in the state of Florida, and it's for this very reason, because there aren't that many restrictions in place, frankly. The Florida governor said it a while ago at this point. He said to any NFL teams, any sports team, any entertainment events, whatever in Florida, he said, you know what? Have as many fans as you want. And it looks like WWE is going to be taking advantage of that, which to me, again, just seems madness, because, again, you can already hear the criticisms of it. You can already hear the after effects of it, and it hasn't even happened yet. You can already hear the criticisms of, as I mentioned, 3-4 months' time. And they're going to say, I can't believe they had that many people in there. We've had it all the time during this pandemic as well. How many times have countries, states, wherever, opened back up and then they shut back down, they go back into a lockdown? Over here, that's the case in the UK. Well, we've opened up a couple of times and then we're back and currently in a lockdown now because they go, oh, I can't believe we opened up. It was terrible. It's caused this massive spike of infections and cases and possibly deaths as well. It just seems incredibly reckless. And the fact that they're saying if the NFL has more than 30,000 fans, that gives WWE the green light to do even more. It doesn't work like that. It really doesn't work like that. Now, as I mentioned, when it comes to the WrestleMania broadcast, the note that each night will run for 4.5 hours, again, to me, is just Too long, way too long. I don't understand it. The initial report earlier this week is that each night was going to be 3 hours, and to me that was perfect. 3 hours, an hour-long pre-show. Each night would be about 4 hours. That pre-show isn't really full of matches either, so maybe half an hour of that goes to matches, if that. That seemed reasonable to me. That's the whole point of doing the 2-day format. WrestleMania has become bigger than one event. It's become a festival, right? So I enjoyed the fact that we were going into this 2-day format because it spread out this insane duration that the events were going towards, where you had a WrestleMania where the show would last 6, 7, 8 hours, and by the end of the show you're so tired, you don't care about the product you're seeing on screen, you just want it to end. And I was happy that they'd gone into the direction. The pandemic had forced it, obviously, with last year when they'd gone to the 2-night format, but I was happy that they were bringing it back this year. I'd hoped that they were going to be doing it for the next couple of years going forward. It doesn't look like that's the case, but anything's possible to change, especially when you're that far out from WrestleMania 38 and 39. I enjoyed that they were going to this 2-day format because it created... turned WrestleMania into a festival. As I mentioned, the shows were way, way more palatable and easy to digest. You weren't sitting there watching a screen or in the crowd watching an event for 6, 7, 8 hours, because that is, again, it's madness. And so many great WrestleMania matches, or potentially great WrestleMania matches, were ruined or died a horrible, horrible death because the show was just too long, and by the time that match came around, fans weren't interested, they were tired, and they just wanted to get out of the arena or switch off the broadcast and go to bed because it was just so long. It was so long. So the fact that you've got a show that's going to be 4.5 hours for 2 nights in a row, again, seems too excessive, I would think. Slightly excessive. I know usually, previously when it was on pay-per-view, WrestleMania was a 4-hour show. And again, towards the end of that, you go, well, that's maybe slightly too long. My concern is if their benchmark is 4.5 hours, historically when it comes to WrestleMania timings as well, that will be much, much longer. When it comes to WrestleMania being a 6, 7, 8 hour show, a lot of the times their intention is for it to be like a 5-hour show. And they get added on legitimately 2 or 3 hours because matches go long, segments go long, packages go long, you name it, things just get extended. So my concern is that if their target for each show is to run 4.5 hours, it's going to be fantastically longer than that, which would be my concern. Now, the NFL confirmed this week they plan to have approximately 22,000 fans to attend the Super Bowl in Raymond James Stadium. So that's their intention, is to have 22,000 fans. WWE are already going for 8 more thousand per night. Again, it's just... that to me is it just seems crazy. It just seems crazy. And I know WWE and Stephanie McMahon have said this week that they're happy that the NFL's Super Bowl is from Raymond James Stadium as well, because it gives them a perfect lead-in. They can see where things went well and where things went badly. They can learn from their mistakes, you would hope. I mean, I'm saying learn from the mistakes, but if they're learning from the mistakes there, why would they go with more fans? Because ultimately, they could come out of the Super Bowl and say, look, we had 22,000 fans there, and that was way too much. That's not 10% of the stadium or anything like that. That could be way too much. Yet WWE is going to try to beat the NFL, because we can beat the NFL. WrestleMania is bigger than the Super Bowl, right? They just need to feed their ego in that way. So, again, that just seems very strange to me. Very, very strange. Now, WWE will likely follow the similar seating guidelines that the NFL are going to be using for the Super Bowl. The NFL announced this week that fans will be spaced in socially distanced seating pods. AEW have been doing a similar thing for Dynamite. Fans are to be seated mostly in pods of 2 or 4 people, with some 6-person pods. Each pod will have 3 empty seats on each side, plus no one sitting directly in front or behind. The plan is that for each pod of the non-vaccinated fans, a group of vaccinated healthcare workers would be seated in the row behind, staggered to the side throughout the stadium. For the Super Bowl, all fans and staff will be given KN95 masks upon entering Raymond James Stadium. All spectators at the big game will also be required to wear masks. I would assume this would be the similar case when it comes to WrestleMania. As I mentioned, when it comes to Dynamite, of course, they've been having live fans for a while now, not to the extent of having 30,000 fans in attendance there, but the situation for that has been very similar in the sense that you have to wear masks. That's the situation. Deal with it, or you go. You get escorted out of the arena, essentially. So I would assume that's hopefully the same. Now, the NFL discussed its Super Bowl plans with the CDC and the Florida Department of Health. The league and the Super Bowl host committee also worked with the 6 largest hospital systems in the Tampa Bay area, which makes up around 30 hospitals. Public health officials in the area reviewed the NFL plans and provided feedback. Again, to me, to put on, when it comes to working with hospitals or working with a hospital, so there's a system in place there, they shouldn't have to be that. It's an event, it's WrestleMania. If you're a hospital and you're having to potentially open up more beds for people that might be coming in because they went to watch WrestleMania, how is that right? How is that right? It seems very, very crazy to me. So as we get closer to the event, I'm sure those plans will change when it comes to the duration of the show, most importantly, the health and safety. To me, as I mentioned, that number of 30,000 fans each night, and I know it's not going to be 60,000 fans because there are going to be people that go to both nights, but potentially 60,000 individuals. To me, that just seems absolutely insane, especially during this time of the pandemic right now. And again, I know it's in April, and I know that that's 3 months away, and plans can change, and plans will change, and maybe the sort of atmosphere when it comes to the pandemic and the environment changes between now and then. Maybe it doesn't, though. If we've learned anything over the course of the last 12 months, is that every time we think something's going to change in 3 or 4 months' time, it doesn't. It stays the same. Remember, this was the company that the rumours were coming out, they wanted fans back by SummerSlam of last year. That was in August. We're nearly at the end of January now. What has changed? Nothing's changed. So that would be my concern for that. Now, when it comes to creative plans for WrestleMania as well, there are no top matches reportedly locked in for WrestleMania 37 as of yet. Word is now that the WWE creative team has started working on bigger ideas once officials made the decision to hold the event over 2 nights. Now, the belief is now that the company needs 4 major matches for WrestleMania 37, 2 for each night. This is according to a new report by WrestleVotes. This likely requires outside assistance from top names because, of course, WWE haven't created any stars for a long time. That line there concerns me as well. This likely requires outside assistance from top names. Why? Why doesn't it? Why not actually, take a risk on talent that's there all the time? Why not actually take a risk on a Big E or take a risk on a Sami Zayn or someone like that? Give them an opportunity, maybe. Not, we're going to have to bring in people from the outside. So when they say people from the outside, this likely requires outside assistance from names such as WWE Hall of Famer Bill Goldberg and John Cena. Now, when it comes to Goldberg is currently contracted for 2 matches per year until 2023. His first match of this year, of course, will come next Sunday at the Royal Rumble on January 31 when he challenges WWE Champion Drew McIntyre. Now, John Cena, on the other hand, he's been away since losing to The Fiend, Bray Wyatt, at WrestleMania 36 last year. He's been focusing on his acting career, of course. I don't even know if you could call his match last year against The Fiend a match. It was certainly a cinematic presentation. It was meant to be a match at WrestleMania 36, but of course, like everything with that event, it got cancelled or postponed. Now, it was also said that The Rock is also unlikely to work WrestleMania this year. As previously noted, WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns has been floating the idea of possibly facing The Rock at WrestleMania 39 from Hollywood in 2023. So that might be the plans for the future when it comes to Reigns versus The Rock. Now, regarding The Undertaker, it was noted that he is still quote, to be determined for the grandest stage of them all, but most people backstage think he's actually done and retired this time, especially after his final farewell at the recent WWE Survivor Series pay-per-view. However, WWE Chairman and CEO Vince McMahon could convince Undertaker to come back, as he has done in the past. There's been no real talk on Brock Lesnar's return for WrestleMania 37, but he has been rumoured. Now, as far as The Undertaker goes, I felt that when it came to Survivor Series back in November, the reason they advertised the final farewell, the reason they did all of that stuff was because it backed him into a corner. That's what I felt was the most important thing there. It backed him into a corner. It made them go, look, we've said that The Undertaker is retiring now. We've said that this is the final farewell. If he comes back now, I mean, what does that make you look like? What, you made that decision a couple of months ago and you've already gone back on your word? How do you have any form of... I don't know. How do you have any form of trust when it comes to your audience? Because anything you promote to them there, the fans will struggle to believe. I think they struggle to believe it anyway. But certainly now when it comes to The Undertaker, when he does retire, it's not going to mean anything again. To be honest, when it came to the final farewell and The Undertaker retiring, it almost didn't feel real in the sense that we've heard this all before. It's the boy who cried wolf principle. So I don't know. To be honest, I wouldn't be stunned when it came to The Undertaker if he came back. The Undertaker wanted to retire. Vince McMahon didn't want him to retire. The Undertaker wanted to retire at the end of the Last Ride docuseries on the WWE Network. It was Vince McMahon who forced WWE Network, The Undertaker, and those producing the series to put in that never say never line in case of emergency, smash glass and bring out The Undertaker. Vince McMahon put that line in there. That wasn't in there originally. So I wouldn't be surprised if Vince McMahon makes the call. It's been well documented at this point, even by The Undertaker himself. He can't say no to Vince McMahon. And Vince McMahon knows that. I felt that when it came to Survivor Series, the whole final farewell deal and really retiring the character, I felt that that was a good way to do it because it put everyone, it backed them into a corner. How do you come out of that? Now, of course, this is pro wrestling, so they can get out of any corner. Maybe they just retired the Undertaker character, but we saw the character that was at WrestleMania 36 against AJ Styles last year was a hybrid of the Dead Man, Mark Calloway, and the American Badass. Maybe that's the character that comes back. We just retired the Dead Man. We didn't retire Mark Calloway or that version of the Undertaker. I wouldn't be surprised in that as well. As far as Brock Lesnar, look, money talks, and Vince McMahon and Brock Lesnar, they do this weird dance when it comes to contract negotiations. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if come WrestleMania season Brock Lesnar comes back. He's just waiting for the money. He's just waiting for the money and the phone call. He doesn't need the money, and he doesn't need the phone call. But if he gets the phone call and the money, Brock Lesnar will come back. Brock Lesnar, at this point, we know what Brock Lesnar does. We know what Brock Lesnar does when it comes to his returns or anything like that. So I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. Now, WrestleMania 36, as I mentioned, was also held over 2 nights and featured 2 special matches each night. Night 1 featured Braun Strowman defeating Goldberg for the Universal Championship. The Undertaker, of course, defeating AJ Styles in the Cinematic Boneyard match, which was the Undertaker's final match. Night 2 saw John Cena lose to The Fiend in a Firefly Funhouse match, plus the return of WWE Hall of Famer Edge for a win over Randy Orton in a Last Man Standing match. Of course, the main event of Night 2 also featured Brock Lesnar losing the WWE Championship to Drew McIntyre. So that's the situation when it comes to what has been planned for that. But as I mentioned, they talk about all of those plans. They talk about needing 2 big matches for each night, but it's also been reported by the Wrestling Observer newsletter that WWE officials reportedly have not locked in any of the top matches for WrestleMania 37 with just 78 days going until the big 2-day event. The reason there's been no real direction for WrestleMania 37 right now when it comes to feuds or Raw or SmackDown, because there have been none of the usual rumor reports on plans of the show, it's because there are no matches in place. Nobody knows what's going on right now. It was noted that top title matches on the Raw brand have not been confirmed. For SmackDown, the Universal Champion Roman Reigns reportedly has 2 different opponents that are being considered. Despite rumors and speculation, Daniel Bryan is not a lock to challenge Roman Reigns on the grandest stage of them all, and Shinsuke Nakamura is also not one of the names being considered, even after their recent interactions on SmackDown. So, after all that, after all the discussion about the plans that are in place, potential people coming in, all this kind of stuff, creative doesn't have a clue, which is no surprise. I think they'll probably wait until right this weekend when it comes to the Royal Rumble. We'll have a much better picture of what's coming on for WrestleMania 37, but frankly, I don't know if that's much of a story that nothing's been planned yet, because the days of things being really, written in stone and things being cut and dry when it comes to plans of WrestleMania, those days are gone. At WrestleMania, the last few years, Vince McMahon has the outline that starts around the time of the Royal Rumble. That's changed in the past. And then when it gets to 2-3 weeks out of WrestleMania, they just throw everything else at the wall and see what sticks. So I wouldn't be surprised. I think, as I mentioned, come Sunday, come the Royal Rumble, we'll find out more. But to be honest, it doesn't surprise me. I think the biggest concern now is how they put on the event. The biggest concern for me is the fans in attendance. The biggest concern for me is the social distancing and potentially having 60,000 fans there across 2 nights, 30,000 on each night. That's incredibly alarming. That's my biggest concern there, but I'm sure time will tell when it comes to the remaining pieces that are said to be put in place. But of course, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on the WrestleMania 37 matches and attendance update? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, all the things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.